Hey everyone, Panera here. I am going to do an episode on Abathur because, hey, why not? Feeling pretty good tonight. So, I'll, before I start though, I want to mention that a lot of people in the know who I talk to on a fairly regular basis, in particular on Skype, and people that have basically participated in the series kind of know the hiatus has been because I've been looking for either like a monetary sponsorship or like for us to be included with some pro gaming team, and I've had a few places interested. Kind of a busy time just before MLG and all that. So I was kind of thinking, oh well, maybe some maybe some in-stream ads would be appropriate. But I was thinking, what would be appropriate for this series? Should I open up a Monster Energy drink or Red Bull or whatever, or should I go the other way? Beer, activate. Yes, I am Canadian. That's how I roll. So there you go. Delicious, crisp. Anyways, so we've got Abathur on the agenda for this episode here. Now, I think he's a really interesting addition to the lore of the Zerg. I really like that the Overmind went aside and separated a part of it, or however it did it, that in particular appears to be rather sentient and is in charge of making the swarm better. And I really, in particular, like I believe it was Kerrigan, yeah, it probably was, asking like, hey, if you're working so hard at this perfection, when is it going to happen, or however it was phrased. In particular, I remember his response saying that it's always a moving target. And that's absolutely true in evolution, right? I mean, you can have something that's so hyper-specialized and absolutely dominates an entire ecosystem. And then you can have a small change, whether it's, a slightly longer summer or a new species arrive or whatever, a different pressure. And suddenly the goal for success has moved. And I think that that's a really good attitude to have when you're in charge of evolving these creatures in order to do things. So I mean, a good example from even the StarCraft lore is, so basically Hydras in Brood War were pretty much beast mode, and then out came the Colossus, which ate them for breakfast. So in Wings of Liberty, of course, they weren't necessarily let's be honest, they were pretty crappy. So basically, they made them so that they were quicker, more maneuverable, and that allowed for them to make a resurgent and actually fill a role. So what was a great unit in Brood War had that time where there was a change in pressure via the Colossus in particular, and then they adapted to make it at least. I mean, obviously, Hydras are still going to get nommed by Colossus, but at least they can run and maybe get us around or something like that. So it's really cool, and I like this character. And River will be the first to tell you that instead of having that bitchy queen voice going like, you need more dinner rolls or whatever, imagine Abathur's voice being just like totally boss. He's got a really cool voice, so I really like that. But let's actually talk about some of the, I guess, mechanics involved or anatomy involved with this chap. And you know what, I'm going to try to use the undo button. Yes, I have figured it out. But if the drawings get a little messy, I apologize. So, let's zoom in here. Oh, just did it all at once. All right. Sorry, I'm still a beginner at paint. Pretty terrible. So what do we have here with this creature? Well, for starters, we have this great big region back here. So obviously we've got like the face, right? Like right here. And I think it's not necessarily like, I don't think you necessarily have like the brain right in here. I think the brain is more likely to be in like this region. Perhaps being as high as this area, I'm not quite sure. Basically it's just a large mass, right, that kind of fills in this whole area. And there is a lot of other stuff going on, like there's these weird bulges that we actually see on his back as well. Not too sure what the purpose of those are. Perhaps it's just containment for this goo here that he's clearly either imbibing or he's using it anyway. And I think this picture represents that he's sort of evolving this creature that he's got in his hands. So I think that's possibly what those are for. Although we do see some rather nice here. Let me use my undo button. Very nice. So we do actually have, let me get a bigger size here, some of the typical Zerg overlapping segmented armor, the tapetum lucidum, or whatever it is, from the Roman infantry, is a great example. You can see that these plates overlap and that they're quite likely to be mobile, which allows for him to sort of, because he's got a really wormy body, so he kind of ducks in and out. So it's good to have this compressible. So I imagine underneath here is a rather large and flexible brain. I think that he's an extremely intelligent being, but he's so single-minded that you're not going to see him, proposing new hypotheses on relativity or quantum mechanics or anything. I think what you're going to see is this entire large brain that would probably extend like back in here, and like see, for example, like right in here. I think that's going to be really hyper-focused. And that's something that you actually see a lot with like high-end, say, sciences, for example. People who are working on, say, quantum entanglement aren't about to go out and propose that two different species of lizard are really, a hybrid or just different phenotypes or whatever. So that does make sense that he's so single-minded, and I like that they did that. It really gives him that sort of one direction in life. So moving on with his anatomy, he actually has, these human-like arms. Not a bad thing to have if you're actually just using them to manipulate, like he is in the picture down here. I mean, you would need some sort of finer tools like digits, for example. You would need to have several, probably, joints in order to, you could go the way of the octopus and have just these really flexible tentacles. But in this case, I'm thinking that he actually has somewhat some exoskeleton. So what you'd end up seeing is like a muscle running in here. And then as it attaches, like you guys who've eaten crab, and I'm sure a lot of you have before, in the claw, when you break it open, and on the top part there's that sort of, that piece of chitin that's inside that you pull the meat off of. I imagine that those are called apodemes, by the way. I imagine there'd be a big apodeme right here, probably one like in here as well, and the muscles attach on either side of that. So as opposed to having the muscles on the outside of the hard thing, like with people, we've got like, go flex your bicep, you'll see like, ooh, sorry, I just flexed my bicep and touched it, and damn, it's got a nice feel. Yeah. So yeah, you can actually see that yourself, right? Whereas when you have any sort of I guess anything with an exoskeleton, I mean, it's not necessary for him to have, say, what like the equivalent of a humerus inside here, and then have it like encased with this. That doesn't really make a lot of sense, right? Especially because he doesn't need that extra oomph. I imagine that like an ultralisk leg would be built like this, having the two different modes of structural support because they're so large. With this guy, it's just spindly little arms meant for spindly, delicate little tasks. So I imagine it's built more like a crab than it is, or like an ant, for example, or anything like that, than it is similar. Then it would be similar to a vertebrate, right? So he actually appears to have, so he's got these two front limbs, and then he's got, let's zoom in here real quick. He has some limbs that sort of come up from below, we can see. Not too sure the purpose of those, but again, there could be used for locomotion through the tunnels, because he does kind of live in the Leviathan. I believe he's attached, similar to what's-her-face, Isha or whatever. She's attached, and I think he just kind of moves through a series of a network, I guess, of tunnels, and perhaps he uses these for some manner of locomotion, or they could just be additional, like they can maybe swing around here, not necessarily that angle, but maybe like come in like this if you need some extra manipulation, which is something that if you're going to be doing this DNA spinning or whatever, you're going to need. He's got two other quite nimble little arms in here, and he does have opposable thumbs, which You can see right here. And that opposable thumbs are really important when you're doing delicate task work. For example, my cat climbs up on my tortoise cage, and he's strong and smart enough to know he has to turn the deadbolt before he opens the... And he actually can turn the deadbolt before he opens the door. But then as he tries to turn the doorknob, he can't, because he doesn't have that opposable thumb, and his hand just slides off. So it makes sense to have this opposable digit. As far as, I mean, you see this in a lot of different animals as well. Things like even chameleons will have that sort of, that like little cute mitten thing that they use to climb on branches. And really, it's just fused. There's 3 fingers on this side, 2 on this side, and they're just fused, but they don't do a lot of that delicate work. This guy is doing that with his arms, right? And in fact, he actually has these. I mean, if you were to look at, say, like, go Google like a lobster's face or something like that, any of those, the crustaceans in particular are a good example. You're actually going to see a lot of different mouth parts. Like, they'll have the labium and labrum. They'll have obviously the mandibles. They'll have various parts in here and down in here as well. I won't get into the technical names, but there's a lot of stuff going on in here, right? And then they've got stuff back in the esophagus as well sometimes. So yeah, I mean, it makes sense because they do a lot of like mechanical chewing and stuff like that. So what this creature has done, obviously, it's got this little head capsule. What it's done is, this is obviously the mouth, or where it, ingests this fluid. And oh, actually, look at this. Looks like there's something incubating up in here. So perhaps these are like little incubation chambers, and that makes sense actually. So I know I said this in the last episode about how it would make sense to manipulate this with this little guy here with when it's in the 1 or 2 cell stage. Perhaps he does this and makes this big blob, and then either like he ingests it and it pops out in one of these areas here, or it looks to me like it, because they're pushing out just by the nature of this armor here. It looks like that's probably what happens. So he's got to have this great big flexible mouth. And so I know you guys are going to giggle because you're children, but these labia, as I'm going to call them, because labia just means lips, man. That's what it means. So these things are clearly meant to be able to open quite wide and then seal shut when necessary. So just to make this, I mean, they're gooey, so they're going to make sort of a watertight seal. Which is probably going to be necessary in order to prevent contaminants and stuff like that, because these look like they're sort of capsules that they then push out into, right? As you can see over here. So, I mean, these little arms here, I would have liked to have seen more variation in their shapes and potentially the sizes. Like maybe have them so they come in like this, right? So let me just do this. So when they come in, instead of coming up like this, they're actually coming in from the side and sticking out. And that way, when he goes to push in, this looks like a Zerg larva or something. He goes to push this in with his hand. He's got more delicate tools in which he can use both the muscular contractions of his labia here, as well as some esophageal movements, and of course the little spindly arms here to help just glide it in, rather than just taking this fistful of Zerg and going blah right into the mouth. So that's just my opinion. I think you could easily have done with, having these things be like little flat kind of things with cilia on them as well, little hairs. That way, when they hit this, they're having a large amount of surface area, but it's quite delicate. So when he goes to push it in, you're not breaking this seal, I guess, of goo, which is essential to avoid desiccation. And I imagine there's a large component of antibacterial and antiviral. I mean, it's just it's almost, think of it like a placenta, right? How much shit can get across the placenta? Well, not a whole hell of a lot. That's why there's an umbilical cord, right? So yeah, that's basically, I mean, we don't really have a good idea of what Abathur looks like. He very clearly has some armor structure that kind of, like this armor here, kind of comes up and then ends up here, right? So this big cephalic shield. But then his internal workings, I mean, I imagine he's got something similar to what we would call a notochord. So just a stiff rod that moves here. Let me use a different color. I should have erased this earlier, sorry. A stiff rod that kind of goes like this as support. with the potential for some sort of either processes coming off of it, like rib-like things, to maintain his nice tubular shape, right? I mean, he does have little bits of armor that stick down here, so that's probably what that is. And then this soft belly here, it looks like it's annulated, which means if you look at like a, say, an earthworm, each ring is an annulation, and it just means like year or whatever, just, or period or whatever. But yeah, it looks like he's got this this sort of belly that works well with contracting, and it makes sense because he goes in and out of those holes all the time and pops in and out and stuff like that. So it really, I mean, one gripe I do have about this is, I mean, okay, so here you have this creature who obviously quite intelligent, very aware of what he's doing to these creatures and how, or at least how he should go about doing it, right? And then you end up with something like the sailing, like the derpy sails on the swarmlings. Somebody did point out in the comments of the last video, and thank you for that, that this is a holdover trait from the Doom Runners or whatever. Okay, well, what is it about the swarmling that made that trait come back? I don't understand why just adding one more into the thing and making them cheaper to make would add this. Like, I really don't get that. Unless there's some scurry like Hawk's gene that's coding for those are really weird. But anyway, I mean, he knows enough about this stuff to make these fine, very detailed modifications, but yet he can't get rid of this awkward sail. Like, I'm sorry, that just doesn't make sense to me, unless there's something that I'm not understanding as far as maybe it's like a linked trait to reproduction or something, but then, you know, in order to make more, but then they don't have reproduction as you would think of it, so it's not a display structure. And I think it's just one of those things that they did because they thought it looked cool, and it's unfortunate because it doesn't really hold a lot of ground as far as yeah. Oh, and here's actually a pretty good look at his mouth and what's going on. So this is you guys are going to giggle again, but basically like a sphincter, right? So he's got these big meaty lips here that are just simply muscles. Well, it's like almost like a circular muscle, right? Which is a sphincter, right? That's all it really is. So it's not a full circle unless it kind of tucks in here, but it does, yeah, it does kind of go in a big circle like that. And so he can probably take this and like close this section up here, and then these sections kind of move together like that, I think is what's going on. And then if he does his Kegels or whatever, he's probably got some ability to, as he swallows, the muscle might ripple back or roll back, and that will aid in the swallowing and eventually ending up with the product up here. So yeah, I mean, he's a really, really cool dude. 2 eyes, you know, a frontal shield here, and then a little kind of shield here as well. This one's got a nice ridge on, or a keel, if you will, on it. So yeah, he's, I mean, this is independent of this sort of collar, and this actual collar here that we're talking about, so I'll circle this whole big thing, is vaguely reminiscent to me of ankylosaurs, the armored dinosaurs. They fuse a lot of bones and stuff to make this sort of collar, and there's a system of them that sometimes runs back a little bit before they get into like the little knobbly bits. These are really quite important as far as identifying species and stuff like that. So, but anyway, yeah, so he's got this weird like horse collar going on. And then as far as his other anatomy, I mean, these little spindly hands, yeah, great, whatever. And then he's got, you know, just typical humerus like thing and whatnot. It's very human-esque or Protoss-esque. Like you can see, he's got a wrist joint, an elbow joint, shoulder joint, and then even going into the hand, he's got two joints coming off of the metacarpals and carpals. So, yeah. I don't know really if there's much else to say, kind of just hoping to get the conversation going about just what the hell is going on. But I guess just before I close, I should point out, yes, I did harp on him for working with this thing, maybe as if it was changing the genetics or whatever, but now it has become quite apparent that this is obviously a specimen that he's incubated in his little adorable incubating sacs, and has just spat it out, hence why there's like goo coming off of here, and he's kind of pulling away at this and whatever just to get a good look and good feel for how this thing is progressing. Whether it be like a Zergling or it's obviously some sort of morph of one of the other of one of these guys. It's got the derp jaw, so maybe it's a Hydra. But interesting enough, this keel here. Let me just grab a different color. Sorry, I'm getting lazy with deleting my colors. This keel here that we talked about with the ridge, you'll notice is right there, and he has again the segmented armor, so and the useless Zerg spikes. So it's pretty obvious that there is something going on here. As far as just the genes are carrying forward from this head armor, and that could be that he's what's called either plesiomorphic, which means primitive, like this, because he is fairly old for the storm. So this could be a primitive trait with this collar, or it could be like a juvenile trait, so paedomorphic. So basically, as Zerglings and stuff develop, they get this, and then it might go away or whatever, or it might not, or it might change and fuse and all that. And because he's, now that I think about it, he is rather larva-shaped, right? So I would say that he is actually childlike in form, right? He doesn't have the derp jaw. He doesn't, he is primitive. We can all agree on that because he's been around forever. So I think that he's also paedomorphic. I'm just circling these for the hell of it, so just wanted you guys to look. Anyway, so I think he's pleased, or paedomorphic, or neotenic, either way. Just for your reference, humans are basically childlike apes. We've got something like 32 characters that are either neotenic, which means basically paedomorphic, so it means that we're like childlike apes. If you compare us with like a baby chimp, we look a lot more like a baby chimp than we do an adult one. Same with like when you compare us with gorillas and all that jazz. So there you have it. There's Abathur, and at least he's not Dehaka, who is... Oh my god, we'll have to have a whole other episode of me raging about that retard. So, alright guys, leave your questions, comments, hatreds and stuff below. See you guys next time.